The Gemara, the Mesichta, starts off with 4 different explanations why Beitzah Shenolda is Asura. So first you have Rab Nachman, and then you have Rabbah, and then you have, who's the next one? Mashkin Shezava, Peres Anoshim, the last 2, Rabbi Yitzchak. Yeah, 4 different. I'd like to speak a little bit about Hachana de Rabbah. The Gemara says that if you have a suffix Beitzah Shenolda b'Shabbos Sfeikla Asura, the Gemara says if you hold like Hachana de Rabbah, then it's understood, because Hachana de Rabbah is a din deraisa. Mashkan Shezava, Peres Anoshkim, is clearly only midrabanan. So what's the story of Hachana de Rabbah? So Rabbah learns out from the Psukim that Chol Mechan Shabbos, Chol Mechan Yontev, then Yontev Mechan Shabbos, then Shabbos Mechan Yontev. That's a din deraisa. The Gemara has there are 2 parts to that din. Hagemara talks if something had an improper hachana, the Beitzah, the hens lay eggs every other day. So we said the Beitzah Shenolda Hu'idam Yasmo Gomer Lo Hachana B'dei Shamayim had hachana B'dei Shamayim. So since it was an improper hachana, nobody violated any Yisr that happened by itself. Hachana B'dei Shamayim is an improper hachana, so you're not allowed to eat it on the second day. That's a din deraisa. Then the Gemara in Eruvin has, based on Hachana de Rabbah, another part, that you're not allowed to do the Hachana on Yontif for Shabbos, or Shabbos for Yontif. So that's what Tosfos is bothered with the Kasha. If we really accept Hachana de Rabbah, so how can you make an Erev Tavshilin, and that allows you to cook on Yontif for Shabbos? Erev Tavshilin is only made the Rabbanan, but if you say Hachana de Rabbah, you're not allowed to make Hachana on Yontif for Shabbos, how are you allowed to cook? So Tosfos says in a few different places that Hachana de Rabbah is only an Issa if it's a Davar Chodesh. When is it a Davar Chodesh? It boils down to 2 things. That's all. The Beitzah Shenolda. Everything else is not a Davar Chodesh. Beitzah Shenolda. Or if you make an Eruvei Chatzeris, you make an Eruvei Tchumen, making a Davar Chodesh that wasn't there before. The whole din of Hachana de Rabbah only applies in 2 cases. Okay, that's how Tosfos explains. But they're both din of deraisa. You're not permitted to make the improper hachana, and even if it happened by itself, you didn't do it. It was b'dei shamayim. You're not allowed to eat it on the second day. Rashi comments, a famous Rashi on Amud Beis, and the same Rashi in Eruvin. Rashi comments that according to Rabbah, there's a din of Hachana de Rabbah, so the din of Muktzeh is a din deraisa. So Tosfos and all the Rishonim disagree. On the margin, they tell you to look in the Tosfos in Eruvin, Lamed Ches Amud Beis. The Tosfos has it. Other Tosfos also have it. The other Rishonim, most of the Rishonim disagree. They say the Gemara in Pesachim that Rashi is quoting says beferish not so. The Gemara talks about bringing a korban on the Mizbeach. So they quote a pasuk from Yecheskel that you have to bring korban should be memashke Yisrael menamuta Yisrael. Has to be kosher food. You got to be makriv korbanos on the mizbeach that are rasa b'achila for some reason or another, then you're not yotze. It's possible. So the Gemara quotes of the feverish din that you can be makriv yayin lenesachim from Muktzeh, and the korban will be kosher. So the Gemara thought originally that Muktzeh la'achila is a din deraisa. Then the Gemara backs out, so it's beferish against Rashi. How can Rashi say that the Gemara in Pesachim says that from here Rabbah learns out that Muktzeh is deraisa? The Gemara backs out from that. That was the Havamin in the Gemara. That's a violation of Mashke Yisrael. So the Shita Mukubetzes on Arda, there is a Shita Mukubetzes on Beitzah. Every so often he has a comment that all of the poskim quote, La Aloha, this is one of them. The Miyashiv Shitas Rashi. The Gemara there is not talking about Muktzeh l'achila, a person eating. The Gemara is talking about burning Muktzeh, pouring it on the Mizbeach Kilui, to use something up. So they thought that just like Rabbah holds that Muktzeh l'achila is deraisa, so too Muktzeh l'kilui. If you're going to have hanosh kilui, if you're going to consume it on the Mizbeach, that'll also be a violation deraisa. That the Gemara backs out from. But Muktzeh l'achila remains deraisa. And all the Rishonim disagree with Rashi. So it's a fundamental machloikas. What's pshat and Hachana de Rabbah? So Rashi understood that the basic din of Hachana de Rabbah is that a din of Muktzeh, that any food that you want to eat on Shabbos and Yontif has to be Muchan Mibod Yom. And then the second step is that if it had an improper hachana, even with the Shamayim, no one did anything wrong. Had an improper hachana, that's the equivalent of no hachana. And food without hachana is a din deraisa that you're not allowed to eat it. And the other Rishonim say, no, it's not that improper hachana is the equivalent of no hachana. No hachana, there's not a problem. Muktzeh l'achila is only midrabanan. But if I have an improper hachana, food had it, called Beitzah, the Misial the Huidim, yes, Magamala, if I had improper hachana, then you're not allowed to eat it. So the Beitzah Levi has a tshuva where he picks up on this fundamental machlekes, Rashi and Tosfos, to discuss a Gemara and Dalet Amud Aleph. The Gemara says, what if you have Shabbos next to Yontif? Beitzah Shenolda on Shabbos is only also on Shabbos. Beitzah Shenolda b'Yontif only also that day. So what if you have Shabbos next to Yontif? So that's a machlokes. Shabbos v'Yontif asmuch machlokes hamarayim, whether Nolda b'zeh, Surah b'zeh or not. So first the Gemara says, it's probably a machlokes whether Shabbos next to Yontif constitute kedusha achas hashtei kedushas. That's itself needs a little explanation. What is that? What is that machlokes? Whether Shabbos v'Yontif kedusha achas hashtei kedushas. But the Gemara says it cannot be, because we know who is it. Rabbi Yochanan is one of them. Rav is one of the Amoraim. Rav holds that it's a shtei kedusha, not kedusha. How can it be? The Rav says, no, the B'zah Surba said, that's only good if you hold kedusha achas. Gemara says, no, the shaila is whether you hold from achana de Rabba. So Tosfos has trouble. What does it have to do with achana de Rabba? So the Beitzah Levi has a tshuva where he quotes a Ritva in Erevin, that it's a fundamental machlokes here. According Rashi, the Shitasai doesn't have any problem. At Tosfos, the Shitasam does have a problem. Rashi is of the opinion that an improper achana is the equivalent of a lack of achana. And achana means that it should be muchan midbod yom. You have to have chol nechan l'Shabbos. So if you didn't have chol nechan l'Shabbos, then you're not allowed to eat the food. So chol nechan l'Shabbos means there has to be muta b'achila on erev Shabbos a little bit. So here, the first day it was Beitzah Shenolda on the first day of the 2 days. It wasn't muta b'achila on erev Shabbos, erev Yontif. So that's why, according to Rashi, there's no problem. If you hold from achana de Rabba, not only improper achana, improper is equivalent of lack of achana. Lack of achana is the basic din of Muktzeh. So the Beitzah Shenolda on the first day will be also on the second day, because it was also the whole first day. So it wasn't muta b'achila the last minute on erev Shabbos, erev Yontif. Hasheni came for Tosfos. Tosfos holds it doesn't have to be muchan on erev Shabbos. It doesn't have to be muta b'achila on erev Shabbos, erev Yontif. It's a din. Achana there means if it had an improper achana. So where was the improper achana over here? So Tosfos gives it two suggestions. So the Beitzah Levi thinks that it's a fundamental nafkamina. If you hold like Rashi that Muktzeh l'achila is a din deraisa, has to be muchan mibod yom, the last minute before Shabbos begins, has to be muta b'achila. Tosfos does not hold from that. Tosfos has later there's a Tosfos in a Masech Shabbos there's a Tosfos. Muktzeh machmas safek yom she'avar is muta. Let's say something is muktzeh on 2 Shabbos next to Yontif. Something is muktzeh on the first day. So it's muktzeh till the end of the day. So according to Rashi, it'll muktzeh machmas safek yom she'avar. Ben hashmashis it'll still be muktzeh, because muktzeh is a davar sheyesh matirin. So you have to wait till after Ben hashmashis. So it wasn't mutter. According to Rashi, Muktzeh machmas safek yom she'avar will be also, because yesterday was muktzeh till the last minute of yesterday. And Tosfos holds not so. It depends on the beginning of the Shabbos, beginning of Yom. It does depend on the last minute from the day before. That's what Tosfos denies, that there's such a thing, Muktzeh machmas safek yom she'avar. So this is a big machlokes. So Muktzeh l'achila is a machlokes Rashi and the other Rishonim, whether that's included in Rabba's din. Most of the Rishonim hold only if it has an improper achana. Rashi says no. Improper achana is the equivalent of a lack of achana. The basic thing is that lack of achana is also b'achila, and therefore Rashi the Shitas holds. Achana means it has to be muta b'achila on erev Shabbos. That's what the Beitzah Levi quotes from the Ritva. Muktzeh, if you're going to burn something on the Mizbeach or pour something down the Mizbeach, there was a havamin in the Gemara in Pesicha that should be the same as Muktzeh l'achila, because it gets consumed. The Gemara backed out from that. There it's only the Rabbana. That's not going to be Muktzeh deraisa. Therefore, it's not a violation of the din of But then Muktzeh, the tiltul, that for sure, everyone agrees that's only a Gzeira D'Rabbanan. That's a Gemara later on Yud Beis Amid Aleph. There's a Machlokes B'Shamei B'Silo. I permitted to carry a lulav to shul, permitted to carry a baby in the street, to perform a bris milah, permitted to carry Sefer Torah to lane on Yontif. So we say like Beis Hillel that it's mutar. So what's the machlokes? The first the Gemara thought incorrectly. First the Gemara thought that from the 39 malachas, only 38 carry over to Yontif, and Hoitzah is mutar on Yontif. Because the pasuk says in Yirmiyah, Lo Satzir Masmi Batechem B'Yom HaShabbos. It sounds like only Shabbos. Yontif Hoitzah is mutar. Gemara has such an opinion at the end of Yuma also, that Hoitzah is mutar on Yom Kippur. Balabatim hold like that. A lot of Balabatim carry their machzorim to shul on Yom Kippur, but we don't accept that opinion. So first the Gemara thought that Hoitzah is mutar. That's a machlokes b'Shamei and B'Silo, and according to B'Silo, Hoitzah is mutar on Yom. The Gemara backs out from that because the Gemara says if Hoitzah is mutar, then there should never be any dinim of Muktzeh, because Muktzeh letiltel was a Gzeira D'Rabbanan mishum Hoitzah. They prohibited handling things, moving things around in the house. Gzeira Shema Yotzi, he may carry it in the street. So the Ravid has this hasog on the Rambam, the end of Perek Chavdala in Hilchos Shabbos. The Rambam explains what motivated the Chachamim to prohibit the tiltel Muktzeh on Shabbos and Yontiv, because the Navi says, Muktzeh Chafatzecha v'dabedover, you're not allowed to deal in business on Shabbos, not allowed to talk about business on Shabbos, dabedover. So they prohibited us from handling things that are usually used to do malachas with them. The Rama has a whole arichas. So the Ravid says, I don't know. In my Gemara it says that Muktzeh is the shvus of Hoitzah. Why didn't the Rama quote what it says in the Gemara? It says it here, Yud Beis Amid. It says it in Masechah Shabbos also. It's a shvus of Hoitzah. The Pashtus is the Rambam knows that Gemara. He wants to make it. A lot of times you have what motivated Chachamim to make a din d'Rabbanan, and then after they motivated it, then it has a slightly different twist to it. It takes on a life of its own. We'll see about Davashesh Lamatirin. There's what motivated the Chachamim to prohibit it, and then the Ran has a whole explanation that it's min b'minoi, because it's heter b'heter, it's not bottle. Wasn't an explanation. What Rashi said is correct. That that's what motivated the Chachamim. They make the din d'Rabbanan Davashesh Lamatirin. But after they made the takana, so then it follows the rules and regulations of min, a whole different thing. The Ran gave the Ran on Adorim gave such a beautiful explanation of Davashesh Lamatirin like bottle. So he misled the Kesed Mishnah to think that it's a din d'Oraisa, Davashesh Lamatirin like bottle. So the Achronim point out that it's a Beferish Gemara of all places in Muktzeh and Perek HaZohov. Gemara is a Beferish, a Davashesh Lamatirin, only leBotol midrabban. So what did the Ran need the whole fancy explanation? B'minai had to behet the whole story. He wanted to, as if it can blend in to be have a life of its own, as if the Tama Takana, what motivated the Chachamim to make the Takana was one thing, the Gzeira was one thing. Then it takes on a life of its own that we treat it based on heter to heter. Treat it as if it's min b'mina, yeah. So take for example in Shulchan Aruch, Mishnah Berurah assumes, most I think assume, Mishnah Berurah assumption, that tiltel Muktzeh is only also biyadayim. If you move Muktzeh with your elbow, we assume that that's mutar. The Chazon Ish has a whole different sheet that he takes on everybody. He thinks that it's not so. The Pashta says that Muktzeh, the way it's usually assumed, the way the Mishnah Berurah says, that Muktzeh is a shvus of Hoitzah. So usually people carry with their hand. They don't carry with their elbows. So to kick Muktzeh, we usually assume it's mutar. Chazon Ish has everything different, but that's what we usually assume. It's only also biyadayim because that's a normal way to carry things. And then it's also only also if you move the Muktzeh. If you just touch Muktzeh without moving it, the Ramah says that that's mutar. You shouldn't touch a Beitzah Shenolda, you shouldn't touch it because if you touch it, it's going to move. You got to be menaneet. It's a light thing. But let's say the Ramah says, what if it's a heavy thing? You have menorahs hagdolos shebebeis hakneses. They have big menorahs. They're attached to the ground. They're so heavy, you can't move them. So the Ramah says if it's a very heavy piece of Muktzeh, it's highly improbable that you're going to move it. So it's mutter to touch it because there's no issue in touching. It's only also to touch if it's a light thing that could easily be moved. That's a famous Ramah. When the Reform movement first started, many of the rabbis had smicha from the Chassam Sofer, and then they rebelled against him, and the rebellion was on very slight things originally, the very slight things. Where the sturgeon is kosher atreif, there's room to be makel. We ask the sturgeon because of the Ramban. Ramban says that it's only called kaskeses if you can scrape it with a knife going in one direction. But the sturgeon, the kaskeses are attached on both sides. It doesn't say that in the Gemara. It's the Ramban claims like that. So we don't eat sturgeon because of the Ramban. So that was one of the things that there were purits together with that. But then, after a couple of years, then there were purits together. The original Reform movement wasn't so terrible. It wasn't up to the Chassam Sofer standards. But then later on, they did all kinds of wild things. So one of the wild things they had was that Amir al-Nachri is only a din derabanan, and Ein Shvuz B'Mikdash, and the Beis HaKnesses is a Mikdash Miyat, as it says in Shulchan Aruch, as it says in the Pasuk, Hey Lahem Mikdash Miyat. So so it's permissible to have a guy to play the organ in the synagogue because Ein Shvuz B'Mikdash. So the Beis HaKnesses, and where do you know that we apply Ein Shvuz B'Mikdash to the Beis HaKnesses? The Ramah says beferish that you're allowed to touch the menorahs and the Beis HaKnesses. But the Ramah didn't say that reason, Ein Shvuz B'Mikdash. That he didn't say. Even in Beis HaMikdash there were dinim, Tosfos and Shabbos points out. There were shvusim in the Beis HaMikdash also. It's not 100% Ein Shvuz B'Mikdash. Every Erev Shabbos they used to take apart the snifim on the shulchan. It's a kli shemlachta leheter. The shulchan is a kli shemlachta leheter, but you're not allowed to handle a kli shemlachta leheter shelo the tzorach klal. You have to have it tzorach. So the more considered dish shelo the tzorach klal. Why do they have these snifim, these separate shelves? The first lechem aponim is on the shulchan, and the next 5 on top. There were 2 piles. Each pile had 6, and 6 and 6 is 12. That's the 12 lechem aponim. So why they have the snifim? Because you're going to have the lechem aponim sitting on top of each other. It's going to become moldy. It will become moldy if it sits a whole week long. But if it just sits for a few hours, it's not going to get moldy. So all week long, they had it on the snifim. But on Shabbos, they're going to take it off and put on the new lechem aponim. So they're going to have to handle that part of the shulchan in order to change the lechem aponim. They considered that shalol tiltal kli shemalachta leheter shalol tzorach klal. So the Rebbe used to say that a lot of people are fidgety. So in the middle of the meal, between courses, they'll play with the forks and the knives, or they'll play with the cups, they'll twirl the cup around. So he thought that that's an Issa. That's considered tiltal kli shemalachta leheter shalol tzorach klal. The Mishnah Berurah quotes one of the Achrayim, I don't know who it is, quotes some Sefer Shabbos or something. He quotes some Sefer that the little kelim on the table, that was never included in the Issa. The forks and the knives and the plates, that was never included in the first place in the Issa. So Leichik thought that even that was included. So he thought that that's also called Shalom Tzarach Klal. So it's incorrect. It's incorrect. First, the Reform only allowed a non-Jew should play the organ. Then they decided, even if you play the organ yourself, it's only, Mashmiach Kol is only the Rabbanah to play a piano, to play a guitar. It's only the Rabbanah. So, Vaiter Ein Shvuz B'Mikdash. But that was all incorrect. There is no such thing, Ein Shvuz B'Mikdash in the Beis HaKnesses. There are 2 different prohibitions. Usually, when we were brought up, so we say, you're not allowed to handle a pen or a pencil because it's Muktzeh. So strictly speaking, that's not correct. Pen and pencil is not Muktzeh. Pen and pencil is a Kli Shemalachta L'Yisser. There were 2 different gzeras. There's one gzera tiltal Muktzeh and one gzera tiltal Kli Shemalachta L'Yisser. They may have been instituted at 2 different times historically. There is a steer between 2 Gemaras. The Gemara in Shabbos, Daf Lamed on the base, says that when David HaMelech died on Shabbos, he was butal b'chama, and the body's going to decompose faster. It's a bizoyin hameis. So Shlomo HaMelech sent a message to the Chachamim, can he do anything to move his father's body out of the sun? So they told him that they had to have kikar etinak. So you see that during the lifetime of David HaMelech, they already had a din of tilta muktzeh. You're not allowed to move a dead body. But then there's a Gemara in Perikol HaKelim, in Masech Shabbos, I think I wrote down Kuf Chav Gimel Amud Beis. So the Gemara says about the Yisurim not to handle Kalisha Malach Daliyis, the Kalisha Malach Dalaheta, B'mei Nechemia ben Chakalya Nishtens Mishten Zu. When they came back from Bovel, Teretz Yisrael, Ezra Nechemia, so they saw the people, the Jews in Eretz Yisrael, were Machal Shabbos. So in order to get the people to be more observant, so they made more chumrah. So they made an Isa Tiltal Kalisha Malach Dalaheter, even though it's not Muktzeh, Tiltal Kalisha Malach Daliyisr, they made Xeris, and then the Gemara says when the people became more observant, Hitira v'chazru, Hitira v'chazru, Hitira. They repealed some of the Yisrael. You didn't need them. You don't need them. Li'olam v'ad. So it's a steer between the two Gemaras. When were the laws of Muktzeh introduced? Was it b'mei Nechemi ben Chakalya, or was it b'mei David HaMelech? David HaMelech was before the Bayis Rishon. Chen ben Chakai is the beginning of the Bayis Sheni, several centuries later. So the Netziv, in a shurim that he gave him, a shurim that he gave him Aloshin, he raises the issue. Seems to be a contradiction. So he suggests that a lot of times you have, they made a takon and it wasn't accepted. He goes, so they made a gzeira of Muktzeh with Kli Shema Kli. It wasn't accepted. It wasn't well accepted, so they had to repeat it again in the days of Nechemia ben Chakai. But it could be, there's another answer. There are two prohibitions, two different dinim. The dinim are not really the same. There is a Tosfos here on Gimel Amud Beis that's quoted l'halacha, the second half of the top Tosfos. Al kof aleha keli. So the Tosfos says, what if I have a kalisha malachta le'isr on the table, and it's in the way? I want to eat over here. I left pens and pencils on the table. I should have taken care of it before Shabbos. So the din is, if it's tzarech l'mekomo, you're allowed to move it. So, or let's say I left the hammer on the table. So tzarech l'mekomo, it's in the way, so I'm allowed to move it. So I'm allowed to move it, and then I have to drop it the second I take it off of the table. So Tosfos says, no, once you're allowed to move it, it's one long tiltal, so I can take it off the table and put it 5 rooms down the hallway to the shed where it belongs with all the other tools. I don't have to drop it right away. So the Ramah quotes this. Tosfos, first of all, is talking about tiltal beheter. You had a heter to carry it. And he's talking about klisha malachta liyisa. The Ramah in Reish Samach Vav, Hilchas Erev Shabbos, has a case. A person forgot and he's carrying money in his pocket. So the pocket doesn't become a basis davar asa because of shocheach. Basis is only a meniach if he did it on purpose. So Tosfos says, when he realizes money is muktzeh, we'll have to discuss in a minute why money is muktzeh. So the Ramah says, you're not allowed to be metaltal muktzeh, but it's one long tiltal. So once I realize I'm carrying the muktzeh b'isser in my house, I have the money shalokedin in my pocket. So once I'm carrying it, though, it doesn't make it a bigger avera if I walk another 25 steps till I go into the room where I put all my money and I open up a drawer and I shake it out. You're not allowed to handle the money, so handle the jacket. The jacket doesn't become a basis because it was shocheach, let's say. So I can shake out the money there. I don't have to drop it right away. So the Mishnah Berurah quotes that many Achronim don't accept that Ramah. That kula that Tosfos had, there are two differences. First of all, Tosfos said if you had a heter, if he's carrying the klisha malachta liyissa because tzorach legufa, tzorach lemekoma, then you don't have to drop it right away. You can continue to carry it. But if you're talking, so first of all, Tosfos is talking when you carry it beheter, not when you're carrying b'issa. If you carry b'issa, maybe you're not allowed to, maybe you have to drop it right away. If you had a heter for the beginning of the tiltal, the heter goes on the whole tiltal. Secondly, the Tosfos only talking about klisha malachta liyissa. If you're talking about a real muktzeh, money is real muktzeh. So real muktzeh, even if you would have a heter, let's say there's mokam hepsed arabim, Mokum Hezek Arabim, the Gemara says you're allowed to be metaltal muktzeh. There's something, let's say there's a glass jar smashed, and there are little pieces of glass all over the floor, and you have little children. Someone's going to get cut, someone's going to get hurt. So you're permitted, if you can kick it with your feet, there's avada better, if you can avoid. But if to remove the hezek harabim, you have to do it with your hands. So b'makom hezek harabim, you're allowed to be metaltal muktzeh. The shaila is, you're allowed to be metaltal and then take it 5 rooms down to throw it in the garbage can. You have to drop it right away. So the Mishnah Berurah quotes, and that's Simmons, Shin Ches or something, he quotes, Roy Bachroinim disagree with the Ramah, that's only a heta by Klisha Malachta Liyisa. It's not a heta by Muktzeh Mamish. So the Reichik pointed out there's another din that's very similar. It would never have occurred to me that it's similar. The din is that the Kikrei Tinik is muta by mace. The Gemara said David HaMelech died in the sun, muta b'chama, and Shlomo HaMelech asked the Chacham, and they said Kikrei Tinik. The Gemara said, L'yomer Kikrei Tinik ala b'mace bilvad. Where did they get this from? From outer space, a special heter, yesh me'yan Kikrei Tinik. So there's a psak in Shulchan Aruch. They don't quote the other machloikas. They quote the kula. The Kikrei Tinik is always mutter by Klisha Malachta Liyisa. Always mutter. Why? Let's say you finish serving the soup, but you have another half a pot of soup full of soup. So I put it back in the refrigerator. But I'm moving the soup pot is a Klisha Malachta Liyisa. Let's say on Shabbos I want to take an empty pot or an empty frying pan. That's a Klisha Malachta Liyisa. You use it to cook in it. So it is a tiltal kelim. You're not allowed to unless it's so good for the Sarch Makaimai. But over here, I'm going to move it from one place to the other. Let's say it's on one table. I want to move the pot with the soup to another table. Probably if I want to put it into the refrigerator, it could be that's Sarch L'Gufay. I want the soup to remain in the soup pot. So maybe that's called Sarch L'Gufay. But let's say I want to move it. So the Gemara seems to assume that it's mutter. So the Balamor says the reason why it's mutter is when you have an empty frying pan or an empty soup pot, then it's a Klisha Malachta Liyisa because it's used to cook. If it has food in it, then it's like a container. It's a different Kli. It's a Klisha Malachta Leheta. So Klisha Malachta Leheta, they're more heterim to move. So the Balamor explains why it's mutter based on assuming that when the soup pot has food in it, then it's a container like a Tupperware. So that's a Klisha Malachta Leheta. And in Shulchan Aruch, they quote the Rosh, who gave a different answer to that, on that Gemara. Why is it permissible to mut the soup pot that has soup? Because Kikrei Tinik. That Gemara says, Le'omer Kikrei Tinik ala l'meis bilvad. So the Rosh says, no, that's by Muktzeh. But this is by Klisha Tiltal Kelim. Tiltal Kelim is a different Gzeira, not the same. Kikrei Tinik is always mutter. The Mechaber quotes, Kikrei Tinik is always mutter by Tiltal Kelim. Only by Muktzeh, Le'omer ala b'meis bilvad. So it could be that they didn't get from outer space at the Kikrei Tinik yesh me'ayin. It could be that l'chatchila, when they prohibited tiltal kelim, they had an exception to the rule, Kikrei Tinik, and then when they prohibited Muktzeh, so they felt by a mace, mishum kavod a mace, you should have some more heterim, so they borrowed the heter that existed already, not yesh me'ayin. There was an ongoing heter, Kikrei Tinik by Klisha Malachta Liyisa, so they carried over that heter to Muktzeh, but then this wouldn't answer the other kasha. I thought perhaps that the two separate gzeras are made at 2 different times. First, the gzera of Muktzeh was made, and then in the days of David HaMelech they already had it. Then in the days of Nechemia ben Chakalia, they made the second Isa. So if you're going to say there were 2 different gzeras at 2 different times, so this suggestion that I made, that they borrowed the heter that was Kayam all the time on a Klisha Malachta Liyisa, they borrowed it and they applied it also to Meis, that Issa, the whole din of Klisha Malachta Liyisa only came later. So that doesn't exactly stim. We usually have a klal called the Tikkun Rabbanan Kein Deraisa Tikkun. All the dinim derabanan, the building blocks of dinim derabanan have to be concepts that exist on the level of deraisa. So the Gemara seems to have over here that the definition of what's Muktzeh is patterned after the dinim of Kabbalah's Tumah. What is Makabel Tumah? That's Gemara's in Perikol HaKelim. The Gemara discusses how many dinim of Kabbalah's Tumah by Kelim carry over to Tiltal Kelim, to Muktzeh. How many dinim of Kabbalah's Tumah carry over? So you see, it was patterned after that. So we have, the Gemara says on the first daf in Bava Kama, that based on the base, there are 4 categories of things that are Makabel Tumah. Adam Kelim, Ochlam Amashkim. So the Gemara says, Adam Kelim can only be Makabel Tumah from an Avad Tumah or above. Avi Avoisa Tumah. Asheni can Ochlam Amashkim can be Makabel Tumah from a Rishon, from a Sheni. So it's different. So whatever is one of these 4 things has significance, and they never made a gzeira. They didn't declare that that's Muktzeh. They said, you're allowed to handle it. But whatever is not one of these 4 things is not Makabel Tumah. It's a piece of junk. Piece of junk is not Makabel Tumah. So if it's a piece of junk, there's no need for you to handle it. So the Chachamim prohibited. You're not allowed to handle it. Gzeira Shem Yotzi. They didn't say, let's make a Gzeira Shem Yotzi on a table, on a chair, on food, on a plate, on clothing. They never made a gzeira. And that's in Revatzi B'Chalim Lamed Boy. On the 4 categories, Ochlam and Mashkem, Adam and Kelim, we handle that all the time. But whatever is junk anyway, garbage, so that's Muktzeh, so don't handle it at all. Gzeira Shem Yotzi. The Gemara just says that it's not, you don't carry over all the details. Take, for example, Adam. So only Adam is Makabel Tumah Yisrael. And Nochri is not Makabel Tumah. You're going to say Nochri is Muktzeh. They said even though Nochri is not Makabel Tumah, he's not a piece of junk. So so it's not going to be Muktzeh. Kelim. There are some Kelim that are not Makabel Tumah. Klei Lolim, Klei Avonim, Klei Adam are not Makabel Tumah. But the Gemara says, Sof Kol Sof they're Kelim. Let's say for Maim She'uvim. The Gemara says even if the water was contained in a Klei Lolim, Klei Avonim, Klei Adam, it's a din of Maim She'uvim because it is a Klei. Even though it's not Makabel Tumah, it's not 100% the same. That's a quirk of a din. That's a detail in Hilchas Kabbalah's Tumah. Ochlam Amashkim. Ochlam Amashkim, let's say, Ochlam Amashkim only Makabel Tumah if it's Roy Lachila Sodom. It's not Roy Lachila Sodom, it's not Makabel Tumah. So what's the story with Muktzeh? Michael Behema is a Muktzeh. So the Tosfos later, the Tosfos shows from the Gemara. Michael Behema, even though it's not Makabel Tumah, but it's still considered Ochlam Amashkim for that it shouldn't be considered Muktzeh. So why is money Muktzeh? Money is Muktzeh because it's not considered, it's not Makabel Tumah, it's considered a piece of junk. You can't use the cash for anything. You can use it, buy something with it, but that's not Hishtamshus in the Kli. Hishtamshus means, Adav Sheyesh Bo Hishtamshus means that Kli, I handle a Kli. I handle a Kli. Let's say the Gemara says, if you have something that doesn't have any Hishtamshus at all, then it's Muktzeh. So let's say you have a candle that's lit. So the Gemara says, Hanach le'ner shemed psila, the oil and the wick and the container, the ner is the cup. It's all basis l'davar ha'asa because the flame, the shalheves is Muktzeh. So how do you carry candles on Yontif? You carry the candlesticks with candles from one room to the other. The answer is that the flame is not Muktzeh on Yontif because you can use it. You can use it. You can be mishtamish to light another candle with it. On Shabbos, you use the or haner, but you don't use the flame itself. You can light another candle from the flame on Shabbos, so that's why the flame of the shalheves on Shabbos is considered Muktzeh. That it becomes basas davaros. But on Yontif, where you can be mishtamish in it, you can handle it. So then on Yontif, the flame is not considered a dovashem b'hishtamshus. You can handle it, but that's why the flame is not Muktzeh on Yontif. There's a Gemara that talks about, there's a Magen Avram. Let's say you have paintings on the wall or photographs on the wall, you never take them down. Some people, when you have guests, you take it down and you show them, then you hang it back up. So that's a dovashesh b'hishtamshus. But if you have paintings on the wall, you never take it down unless you're painting the wall or you're putting on new wallpaper on the wall. But otherwise, you never take it down. So that's considered dovashein b'hishtamshus. So the Magen Avram says that that's Muktzeh. In the later Igros Moshe, in one of the later Igros Moshe, they have short psukim from Moshe, who was a very old man. So they wrote over psukim. So they asked him that shaila about paintings and photographs hanging on the wall. He said he doesn't see why it should be Muktzeh. The Pashtus is like the Mogan Avram, because there's a Gemara like that. The Gemara talks about you have a beehive, and you have Kaverish al Dvorim, so you leave some of the honey there. Honey is Michael Behema, because the bees, the honey in a jar is Michael Adam. But honey, there's honey that you leave there, that's Michael Behema, so it shouldn't be Muktzeh. So the Gemara says, but the honey that you leave on the beehive for the bees to eat, you never touch it the whole time. That's considered Muktzeh, something that you never handle. The Gemara says, you never handle it, be a dayim. Even though you're using it, you're letting the bees eat it. So that's where the Mogan Avram got this idea from, that if you have photographs on the wall, you never handle them, that's considered a dover she'en bo hishtamshus. So that's money. The Achronim say there's another reason why you shouldn't handle money, because it's a malachta li'isa, like a klisha malachta, because you use money to purchase things. You're not allowed to buy things on Shabbos and Yom Tov. But the main reason is not that a klisha malachta li'isa. No, it's muktzeh machmas gufa, muktzeh machmas atzma.